Hey everybody, so I'm off with the grade 5s today, so we're going to continue our lesson on compression. So I'll kind of recap some of the things that we did last time and then show you some new stuff and then tell you exactly what you need to hand in. So you should, by last class, have some kind of drum kit. So this is Impulse, got a bunch of drum sounds in here. I should also have a simpler kit. So this was just a preset I grabbed. So you can go into instruments, grab simpler, and just throw a sound in there of your own or something I gave you, whatever you want. You can use a preset, doesn't matter. As long as you have something, okay? One of the requirements for this assignment is that you have at least 2 clips in your drum kit and at least 2 sort of melodic sounds. So I suggest for this project that you use sort of longer pad sounds. So in here, I use this kind of really spacey whatever. It's not the greatest sounding thing, but you're going to really hear the sidechain compression and the sidechain gating, which is what we're going to get into in the last few minutes of the video. So I've got, a kick drum. I've got another one with a couple little bits. I've got another drum kit over here where I did a hi-hat and a kick just to add to it a little bit. Okay. I also decided to take a few things out and send them to other channels. So remember, I can create an audio track, and if I click in out, then I have sort of my virtual patch bay, and I can go in here and say, well, I want to take something from Quantic House, which is this preset drum kit that I took, and I can take any one of these sounds that are in there. So these sounds all correlate to the sounds that are in the drum kit over here. So I'm going to get rid of that. And you notice that on my snare channel, I did just that. I went to Quantic House, and then I took the snare drum. This, I took the hi-hat, Quantic House, and then down here, it's hi-hat, the close hat. The reason I did that is because I wanted to put a saturator and a little bit of reverb on this snare. It sounds a little dull without it, okay? Nothing fancy, but at least it's kind of building up the mix a bit. My hi-hats, I did the same thing, put a bit of reverb, and I put this, you can really hear it on this. So I got rid of a bit of chorus, I put a bit of chorus on and to wash it out, and then I put a bit of reverb to give it some space. Now, one thing I kind of talked about, but I didn't show you how to do, was grouping things. So I want to take all these drums and I want to group them. So I'm going to click on the first one. I'm going to hold down Shift and click on the last one, or you can hit Command or Control to kind of decide I want that one and that one, and whatever. But you can remember, you can drag these things around. So I would put all the things I want to group next to each other, so it makes sense. Because I think if there's a gap, like if I put this C sharp pad in the middle, I don't think I could group, things that are on either side of that. So if I click that, hold Shift, I'm going to right click and I can go group. Okay, you can go Command G or Control G to group those things together. So I'm going to do that. You notice it kind of puts this bar over top of all of these. I can sort of minimize this so it helps save space, but it also allows me to throw effects on there. So I'm going to throw a compressor on there. So we're looking at audio effects up at the top, compressor. If I drag that onto the group, okay, and I get really harsh with it, I can throw my threshold way down, and you can kind of hear this working. The more I bring my ratio up, the more it's sort of squashing things. Okay, if I get rid of my attack, it's going to smash things right away. It sounds pretty horrible. Okay, so I'll give it a bit of attack, a bit of release, and I won't go so crazy with it. Whoops, oh, my mouse is going crazy. Okay, so I get it. I get something different. I'm listening through my computer speakers while I do this at a very low volume, so it's not going into the mic, so I can't hear if I'm doing a wonderful job. But your purpose, or the purpose of this, is for you to play around and see what kind of sound you can get out of it. So just try these different settings and see what happens. Okay. So we do that, and then you can grab the volume, kind of drag it down, and bring it up until it sits at a nice place in the mix. It's not going over 0. I might want to start playing this pad so I have something to kind of mix it against, right? So if it's you know, if the drums are overpowering that, then I want to bring them down a bit. So there's some kind of balance happening with that, basic balance. Now, if I want those things to gel together a little bit more, then we're going to look at our glue compressor, which is what we were talking about before. So, G glue compressor. I want to put that onto my master. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to go to my master. And what I want to do is grab my threshold here and drag it until it starts pumping. And I don't want it to go over 5. Okay? So some of the things I want to look at are my attack, my release, and my ratio. Okay, I want to be really subtle with it, so I'm going to use a ratio of 4. What that means is that any part of this that goes above the threshold, so the threshold is kind of an imaginary line, and if the volume goes over that line, okay, it's sort of a volume setting, then it's going to crush that down a quarter of what it was before, because it's 4 to 1. If I set it to 10 to 1, it's going to crush it to 1/10 of what it was. 2 to 1, it's going to crush it in half. So 4 is a good sort of zone. If I have a really quick attack and a really quick release, it's going to pump a lot more. It's going to be a bit more aggressive, and you know, my kicks and my snares aren't going to pop through. So I want to bring my attack up a little bit so I can let those through, and I want a bit of release so it just doesn't close down and pump as soon as I do that. Okay, so that's sitting kind of at a nice level, and then you can kind of make the volume back up that you lost by playing with the makeup. And then by clicking on this yellow thing, we can bypass it, so we can kind of see the volume is very similar now, but when I turn it on, you can see it kind of brings things together a little bit. So that's what we were working on last class for the majority. So I want to make sure that you really understand that, because I always put a glue compressor on when I start creating things and mixing things, because it's going to make it sound a bit more like a real song. It's gonna kind of gel things together a bit. So this is nice for putting on drums. Be real subtle with it. You group things that kind of work together, and then it's just going to make them feel like they belong together. Now, I'm not quite hitting 0, so I'm okay over here. I'm not hitting the red anywhere. But if I just kind of pop over, say there's a snare drum that gets it just above the 0, what I can do is use this limiter. So I'm going to find the limiter, and I'm going to drag it after my glue compressor. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring the volume up. And a limiter is a compressor with an infinite ratio. That means that anything that goes above the line is automatically squashed down as far as it can go. So just to see a harsh example, if I grab the gain and smash it all the way, you see it sounds horrible and distorted, and there's this sort of orange line. And the orange line is telling you how much it's compressing. So I want to kind of bring the volume up, but so that I barely see that kind of moving. Okay, and I see this sort of at 0, so I'm about as loud as I can get. This is a good way to kind of get things loud and stop it from clipping or distorting. It's just kind of a nice safety thing. So this is a good way to sort of start your project. And you always want to check here every once in a while, make sure you're not compressing more than sort of 5 dB here, and that you're just kind of like tickling this, like you're not really seeing the orange come down. So we've played with the compressor on here, sort of for effect. We've grouped a couple things, okay, so that they're all being compressed. So all these things that have gone out to separate channels are now being sort of combined into one, and we can put single effects on it. We've looked at the master, and we've got this kind of gelling things, and we've got the limiter to save us from going over and clipping our file. The last thing we want to do is maybe take this Seashore pad and add a compressor or a gate and get it to pump a little bit. I mean, that's going to be our example. Basically, the new thing we're looking at today is sidechain. So you see this little button here is going to expand the compressor. If I click sidechain, then just like we did on our audio channels, okay, where we could select what we wanted to bring into that channel, we could select what we want to bring into this compressor. So I'm going to say audio from, and I can pick a few things. So if I want to click on Quantic House, then it's not going to give me all the individual sounds. It's going to give me the whole kit. And what that's going to do is when I drag my threshold down, you notice because my kick drum is my strongest thing, this gain reduction meter is kind of going in time with the kick. So if I solo this, you can hear that the Seashore pad is kind of pumping. If I get rid of this, then you see it's not moving at all. It's not really active. Okay? So you want to play with your ratio with the attack of how quickly this sort of pumps. You notice if I bring the release up, it's going to sort of slow that down. If I get rid of my release, it's going to pump really, really fast. It's going to go from 0 to nothing instantly. If I add a bit of attack, it's going to kind of slow that down. So you can kind of get different rhythms and stuff if you're doing this kind of pumping effect with it. The reason that I use it the most is if I have a kick drum and a bass line that's playing at the same time, there's going to be a lot of bass happening, and you want to let that kick drum come through. So every time the bass plays, you can get a compressor to bring down the volume of the bass line so the kick plays through, and then as soon as the kick disappears, then the bass line comes back. So it can kind of create this groove between the two things, but it's also allowing you to get your whole song louder, because if I just have, you know, tons of bass and tons of stuff happening there, it's just going to sound muddy and the mix isn't going to sound good, and I can't get it as loud as I want it to be. So that's kind of this is kind of a creative way. You can also use it to make your mixes sound better. The other thing we can play with, so if I sort of bypass that, is the gate, because I want you to play with this concept of sidechaining. And you can sidechain things with gates. So if I put my gate on here, we don't hear anything. The concept of this is if the volume doesn't go above this, you're not going to hear it. If I drag my threshold down, you're going to start to hear that pad. Okay. If we click on this again, like we did with the compressor, then we can see the sidechain section. I can choose, maybe I'll use Quantic House. Now you can use the snare, you can use whatever you want. Okay, and you notice you can see when the snare comes through. And if I bring this down, then every time that snare plays, it's going to play that. If I grab Quantic House, the most powerful part is my kick drum. So you're going to hear that pop through. Play with the release, and you kind of hear this kind of pumping sound a little bit. Play with hold. You can play with the attack too, the floor. Just see what these things do. It's just a chance to kind of investigate. If you click flip, it's going to kind of sound like the compressor, because we're just playing with volume, so it's pulling the volume up and down. So if we hear that in time with this, okay, you can kind of hear what it's doing if I get rid of it. Okay, so we have this pad sound that just keeps going, but if I play with the gate, it's going to kind of duck it out. If I click flip again, it does the opposite. Okay, so those are the things that I want you to play with. Now, the way that you're going to hand this in is like the previous project. Okay, you're going to save this. So you've gone and you've saved your live set. I've already called this compression assignment Adam Hodgins. So like that, a lot of guys have been handing stuff in and not putting their names on it. I can't tell who's sent what through my Dropbox. So you need to make sure your name's on it, or it says if you didn't hand it in. So I'm going to hit save on this. What I also want to hit is collect and save. And what collect and save is going to do is grab any samples that are around your hard drive. So if you have samples you have a sample directory over here, and you use some presets and you used all these different things, all those audio files are all around your hard drive. And what this does is it collects all those things and puts it in this folder. So here's that compression assignment project, Adam Hodgins. When I look in there, there's my sample folder, imported. I've got a bunch of sounds in here. Okay, so if I pass that to someone, or in this case you hand it in to me, then all of those files are in there, so I can open it on whatever computer has Live 9. So it's a good way if you're like working on a project with someone through the internet, or even someone at Selwyn, and you want to pass files back and forth to work on them individually, then it's a good thing to do. You hit collect all and save, and then they're going to have everything that you used. Now, if you hand that folder in, it's just a giant folder with a bunch of stuff. Okay, so if you're handing someone a USB stick with all this stuff on, great, they can open it. But I want you to create a live pack, because a live pack is kind of like a zip. It's a single file that contains all this stuff, and we can create those by going File, Manage Files, and this is exactly how we did it on the last project. So if you're one of those guys who still hasn't handed that in, well, here's a bit of a review on how to create an Ableton Live Pack. So you go Manage Project, and at the very bottom it says Packing. Make sure that you click on the arrow, say Create Pack. It's going to call it the exact same thing that you saved the Ableton project as, or you can go in here and give it a proper name if you didn't previously. Hit save, I told it to save on my desktop. It's going to think for a little bit. So I'm going to come back in a minute when it says successful. Okay, so it's adding all those files, and then I'll get a little pop-up window that says you were successful, you created the live pack, you know, wonderful. I hit OK, and when I look on my desktop now, I have this ALP file, so Ableton Live Pack. So this is a single file that you can upload to me. If it's a little too big, this one's 121 megs for some reason. Maybe I used a really big sample in Simpler. Then you can just pass it to me on a USB stick. But if it's up to 75 megs, it'll go into that Dropbox folder that I emailed you. So try and send it to me that way. That's all you need, I think. So remember, you've grouped something, you've put a compressor on it, you've routed a couple things, you've got at least 2 clips on those 2 instruments. I added an extra instrument, but you don't need to do that. And on your master especially, you have a glue compressor, you have a limiter, okay? If you miss anything, go through this video, and you've got sort of a compressor that's compressing your drums and doing some fun stuff. That's everything you need, okay? So that's assignment number 4.